We're live. At least I think we're live. Just bear with me for one moment. Let's see if this is going out. I can see we've got Jonathan in the chat. We've got Christian in the chat. We've got Chris in the chat. Good evening, everyone. Jet's in the chat. Evening, Jet. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. We're live, so I'll get rocking and rolling straight away. I can see Mikey's joining, Hem's joining. Good evening, everyone. Team Groves is in the house. Right. In British boxing and boxing in general, I think there is a chance of rushing prospects too early. I've been in a Twitter debate with someone today who was telling me that Daniel Dubois is ready to take on Bermain Stavern or Chris Arreola. My point is that when you're dealing with prospects in boxing, you're not really being fair to them. You're not really giving them the best chance of being successful in their careers unless you build them to a certain level. Having said that, there are times in boxing when it is just so exciting and so appealing and so good for both prospects' careers to match them against each other. Thinking back to recent examples, Tyson Fury versus Derek Chisora, where both were young, unbeaten fighters. George Groves versus James DeGale, where both were young, unbeaten fighters. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Billy Joe Saunders, again, unbeaten fighters. Could have been made at later stages of the respective fighters' careers, potentially for a few more quid, potentially for world titles on the lines. But those fights have really built them. Those fights have taken their profiles to completely new heights and different levels. And realistically, if you look at the fighters involved in those matchups, the losses that were suffered weren't massively detrimental to their careers. Tyson Fury beat Chisora. Chisora went on to get a rematch. Chisora went on to fight David Haye. Chisora went on to fight for the world title against Klitschko. Groves beat DeGale. You know, DeGale went on to win a world championship. DeGale went on to be widely considered the number one in the division. Billy Joe Saunders beat Chris Eubank Jr. To be honest, Chris Eubank Jr.'s career, whilst it doesn't surpass Billy Joe's in terms of resumes, Chris Eubank Jr.'s profile, publicity, image is probably higher than Billy Joe Saunders is at present. My point is that when you get matched and when you match two prospects in the right kind of fight and it becomes such a big fight, when you're in that kind of situation, a loss at this stage of your career isn't always a disaster. And if anything, it can, you know, really, really, really boost a fighter's career and grow their fan base and grow their publicity. That is what I believe to be the case in what is a absolutely fantastic fight in the British light welterweight division between Ohara Davies and Josh Taylor. There's several really, really intriguing subplots to the fight. One of them is that at the same time, on the Frank Warren side of the coin, there's two additional guys in the division, light welterweights, who are both superb operators in the British light welterweight division, who are also squaring off. Young 23-year-old unbeaten Jack Catterall, 18-0, and 27-year-old Tyrone Nurse, 35-2. So 4 fighters all in matchups against each other in the light welterweight division. A truly fantastic matchup. And, you know, potentially the winners of those 2 fights could go on to fight each other. Don't forget Eddie Hearn's got Ricky Burns. Could the winner of Ohara Davies, Josh Taylor, square off against Ricky Burns? I know Ohara Davies trains with Ricky Burns, but think how massive a fight that would be in Scotland if Josh Taylor were to win and he were to fight Ricky Burns. But, you know, I'm getting ahead of myself here. The fight in its current form, just Josh Taylor versus Ohara Davies, really is intriguing enough. Let's start with Josh Taylor. 9-0, 8 KOs, aged only 26. Beaten 1 or 2 fringe contenders. The main win on his resume is Dave Ryan, 17-9 when Josh Taylor stopped him. And that piece of form is a highly questionable piece of form. Dave Ryan had been inactive for a long time. And it's unclear how much Dave Ryan had left in the tank when he fought Josh Taylor in that fight. But Josh Taylor looked absolutely sensational. And I've got to applaud Josh Taylor, not only for that performance, I've got to applaud Josh Taylor for taking this fight, because I even speculated on this channel that he and his team had been made to look a bit of a mug by Ohara Davies and by Eddie Hearn. Shane McGuigan, for my money, came out of a Twitter exchange with Eddie Hearn very, very poorly when he suggested that Eddie Hearn didn't make an offer to get the Josh Taylor fight, and Eddie Hearn screenshotted the offer that he had made with the amounts in question. But it looks like a deal has been done, and it looks like now Ohara Davies will travel to fight up in Scotland on the 8th of July. So I presume the McGuigans have made a substantial offer to Ohara Davies, which he has accepted. So I give a lot of credit to Josh Taylor for taking a fight of this magnitude so early in his career. And I give credit to the McGuigans for clearly making an attractive enough offer to get this fight on the cards. Josh Taylor is someone we've talked about extensively on the channel. I've covered him in videos. We've also discussed him extensively on the podcast, which is every Wednesday night. And, you know, we view him as an extremely exciting fighter. He's a southpaw who can do everything. He can box from range. He's extremely athletic, extremely heavy-handed. His inclination, despite being a good, capable boxer from the outside, and despite being a tall, rangy guy, is to bring the fight inside the pocket and to get involved in a bit of a scrap. I've compared him on several occasions to Errol Spence. And, you know, I really think that he brings some of those attributes to a fight. You know, I rate Josh Taylor as someone who really has got a future world championship written all over him. At the same time, I've been massively impressed by Ohara Davies. And Ohara Davies, make no mistake, has fought at a higher level than Josh Taylor. He's also more experienced in the professional ranks, 15-0 with 12 knockouts. And he's already rated by BoxRec as the 14th best light welterweight in the world and the 3rd best light welterweight in Great Britain. His biggest name opponent was when he beat Lee stoppage on the recent David Haye versus Tony Bellew undercard. For my money, his most impressive win was actually against Andreas Scarpa, who was 20-2. I was actually at that fight. I was ringside for that fight at the Wembley Arena, and that was his second to last fight. And Ohara Davies didn't actually put in too good a performance that night. You know, he looked a bit sloppy. Scarpa, maybe he was very awkward, but Davies didn't really get his punches off in the manner with which I expected him to. But nevertheless, despite not looking at his best, he took out a guy like Andreas Scarpa, who was an operator who I thought was really impressive. And Davies pretty much won every single round. He pretty much cruised to an easy unanimous decision in that fight, winning every single round against a guy like Andreas Scarpa, who looked a really solid fighter. And if I recall correctly, Scarpa was coming off a very, very, very big win against John Wayne Hibbard prior to that fight. So, yeah, Ohara Davies has really impressed me. Both of them are very heavy-handed. You know, Josh Taylor, 8 knockouts from his 9 wins. Davies, 12 knockouts from his 15 wins. I suspect that if you put the two guys next to each other, I think Josh Taylor's listed as 5'10". Ohara Davies, I've met him 3 times actually. Can't say I accurately measured his height, but he appeared to me to be a shorter guy. He also fought earlier on in his career at lightweight, which maybe ties in with that sort of suggestion that maybe he's possibly not got the same frame as Josh Taylor. Despite the fact that Ohara Davies is the smaller man out of the two, I believe Ohara Davies is kind of the guy who's more likely to try and keep range in this fight. Of late, he's been the kind of guy who almost likes to adopt that sort of shoulder roll stance. He doesn't have the most electric footwork or lateral movement in terms of the speed with which he moves around the ring. But he works things off the jab, and then he looks to pick heavy shots. He looks to pick his shots, and he's quite explosive when he throws them. You know, you see big single punch counters. He's quite an accurate puncher. And once he gets his work off, he starts to put his punches together a bit better. And he is very, very heavy-handed. So these two are squaring off. I can see Tom in the chat is asking what the date is. Yeah, it's the 8th of July at the Braehead Arena in Glasgow. And I think it's an extremely exciting fight. In terms of picking a winner, well, the other thing I'll say is the build-up for this fight is going to be electric. You know, Ohara Davies, love him or hate him, and I know a lot of people are not fans of Ohara Davies. He's charismatic inside the ring in terms of the way he fights, and he also really does sell a fight outside of the ring. You know, he brings a lot of hype and a lot of intrigue. Team Groves has made a good point in the chat that this fight is scheduled for the same night as the Billy Joe Saunders Kurt Cedez fight, which will take place at the Copper Box, and that's really unfortunate. And Team Groves is spot on there, so shout out to him for that comment. That is really unfortunate because Billy Joe Saunders, you know, world title fight against Kurt Cedez, a huge amount of talent on that undercard. Anthony Yard, Daniel Dubois, etc. It's such a shame that 2 nights of boxing have to conflict and people will choose one or another to watch. And it's unfortunate, you know, that really is a negative as far as I'm concerned. But regardless of that, 2 excellent fights. It may be we have to watch one live and then watch one later on record, but, you know, rather that both nights of boxing still go ahead, I guess. Certainly, Ohara Davies versus Josh Taylor is a more intriguing matchup, a closer fight than Billy Joe Saunders, Kurt Cedez. But obviously, Billy Joe Saunders being a world champion and having been involved in bigger fights is probably a bigger name and a personality at this stage. So it may well be that his fight generates the most interest. But there you go. This is going to be a very big fight. It's going to be a 50-50 fight. And it's going to be one that generates hype, because whenever you have 2 undefeated British fighters, especially when there's a bit of bad blood, a bit of feeling outside the ring, it's going to generate interest. And you guys know how Ohara Davies can sell a fight. You know that he calls himself the king of social media, etc. So let's go to the chat. The first thing I want to do is a bit of a poll as to who you guys have winning this fight. I can see there's 80 of us watching now. 80 of you guys watching now even. So if you're one of the 80, please do take the time to hit the thumbs up button. And if you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. But let's go out to the chat right away and let's see who people are picking. So make your predictions in the chat. Let's do a poll as to what the people watching this channel think is going to happen in this fight. So Scunny Tom, he said, surprised Hearn has let Davies take the fight on another channel. Yeah. Well, sorry to Eddie Hearn, actually, because, you know, I'm impressed that he's done that. Darren's gone Davies, so 1-0 Davies. Mikey's gone Taylor. Triple D's gone Taylor. Lewis has gone Taylor. Amir Khan's chin has gone Taylor. Samara's gone Taylor. Team Groves Ohara. Boom Taylor. Jared Taylor. Sam Taylor. John Taylor. Balthazar Davies. Mate Davies. Tom Davies. Aidan Taylor. Tutor Ohara. Perry Ohara. Matthew Ohara, Stuart Ohara, Anonymous Ohara, Charlie Taylor, Pure Carnage Ohara, Aaron Taylor. So, seems to be, and Rough Mus is going Davies, seems to be, I would say, about 60-40 there in favour of Josh Taylor. And that kind of doesn't surprise me, I guess. Taylor has looked truly exceptional in his comeback. And I think that win against Dave Ryan has really stuck in people's minds, and very much rightly so. Because we've seen Dave Ryan in a lot of big fights. We know that he's a capable operator. And Josh Taylor actually took him to school and destroyed him and put a pretty savage beatdown on him in that fight. And that's lived long in people's memories. Ohara Davies did a similar thing to Derry Matthews. See, Derry Matthews is a guy who was stepping up in weight class and very much at the end of his career. You know, it's hard to know how much that form against Dave Ryan actually meant by Josh Taylor, because similar to the Derry Matthews fight, Dave Ryan was very much a guy who was in the autumn of his career, but, you know, maybe he wasn't quite, maybe he was autumn of his career and Derry Matthews was winter. But yeah, people seem to be picking Josh Taylor maybe Looks very, very heavy-handed, as Mikey says in the chat. He looks like he's got all the skill in the world, and it looks like he's someone who can really, really mix it up. I suspect this fight will initially be fought at range. I think Ohara Davies will look to keep range. I think Ohara Davies is capable at positioning himself in ways that he's not simply eating a jab and letting an opponent walk him down. I think he's relatively adept actually at keeping that shoulder roll stance and throwing out a jab to try and keep distance. So I suspect we see some tentative rounds here where both guys posture and try and pick shots from range. I think that very possibly Josh Taylor will be the come forward individual. I think it's very possible that Josh Taylor will be the one with the higher output and looking to get his shots off earlier in the fight. And that could be a deciding factor here, I guess both of these guys are relatively untested in the area of chin. I'm yet to see either of these guys fight where they've had to take noticeable or repeated punishment. So that could be a key factor. When the going gets tough, we could find that one of these guys doesn't really have the punch resistance of the other, or that one of them hits substantially harder than the other. That's a real factor in the fight. I guess another thing you could say is that neither of these guys has really had to go into the trenches so far. They've both been in fights really where they quite comfortably cruise through, either by scoring a stoppage or just by being completely outclassing the other. So it's a question really of whose upside you rate higher at this point, because we haven't really seen either of these guys hurt in a fight. We haven't seen either of these guys struggle in a fight, etc. And that's what makes it all the more exciting. I guess to an extent, it is guesswork, really. So there we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it out to the chat right now. I want to keep this video purely on Ohara Davies v Josh Taylor. So I want to focus the concentration on this topic. I'm not going to be looking at comments on this particular video for other fights, because we'll cover that elsewhere or on the podcast this week perhaps. But give me your comments on this. If you want your comment to be read out, put the hashtag BG on your comments so I know you want it read out. Mikey said Taylor will pick him off from range and with speed, angles and variety. Ohara will find it hard to pick clean shots, in my opinion. Don't disagree with you there, Mikey. I think that's a good comment, mate. Anonymous says, it's about time the Scottish had a decent fighter. Taylor could well be the man. Indeed. And maybe they'll even do a passing of the torch fight if he's successful with Ricky Burns. Maybe Eddie Hearn will start to wind down Ricky Burns' career and maybe inclined to put him in a big fight up in Scotland with Josh Taylor. Let's see. Scunny Tom says he really likes the 140-pound division. Certainly very, very exciting division domestically. In the boxer rankings, you got Burns 1, Catterall 2, Ohara 3, Nurse 4, Robbie Davis Jr. 5, Josh Taylor 6. You got other names in there as well: Joe Hughes, Tommy Coyle, Lenny Dawes, Josh Lever, Mitchell Smith is listed as a light welterweight. That's a bit of a joke in itself, but perhaps that's the discussion for someone else. Dan Mack says, BG, is this fight on Channel 5 as Taylor has a contract with Channel 5? Dan, I would presume so, mate. I don't know. I don't know is the answer. I haven't heard a confirmation on broadcast. Mikey says, BG, who are you picking? I see it as a 50-50, Mikey. I really, really struggle to pick a winner. And I'll have to watch a lot more footage before I do. But right now, if I had a gun to my head, mate, I'd go with Taylor. And I'd go with Taylor for exactly the reason that you mentioned earlier on in the chat. Mikey says it's on Channel 5. Charlie says, BG, would you like to see the winner unify the Commonwealth title with the British title against the winner of Nurse Catterall? Absolutely. Who wouldn't? I mean, that would be a hugely exciting fight, definitely, and real good times for the domestic division. Rough Masters put BG. I think it's funny that Ohara gets so much flack for his outside the ring persona. He's clearly not naturally that charismatic or as wild as he seems, but he's doing all he can to get coverage. Seems like a nice kid. He's certainly taken it to the next level. I've seen an interview with Ohara where he said if he hadn't taken it to that level, he'd probably still be fighting on undercards at your call. And do you know what? Maybe he's right. Maybe he's right. So I give him some credit for that. Potentially he's taken it a little far with some of his statements, and it's made him appear dislikable. But this is boxing. I guess you've got to look after one. After number one. Anonymous said, what's harder to call, Brooks Spence or Taylor Davies? Do you know what? In a weird way, I'm going to go Taylor Davies, Anonymous, because there's so many unknowns with Taylor Davies. You know, they're relatively new in their career. They haven't been tested so much, whereas Brooks and Spence are more proven commodities. John said, do you think Ohara will find it hard fighting on another promotional event, being in another country, also with the Scottish fans against him? Not really. He seemed to relish that in the Derry Matthews fight. So I think he's got good experience from that fight going into a matchup like this. Mikey says Nurse will get the British title outright if he beats Catterall. Surely he'll then vacate. Depends, Mikey. Yes, in a sense, but the biggest fight available to him, if it is available to him, is the winner of this fight. You know, that's a huge matchup for a Tyrone Nurse if it gets offered to him. I guess the other thing though, Mikey, is if Ohara Davies wins or Josh Taylor wins, Tyrone Nurse is a risk. You know, whether they'll want to take that risk, Tyrone Nurse may not be viewed as the right reward for such a risk. So potentially that fight doesn't happen. Triple D says, BG, should they have waited and built this fight up? Maybe waited like a world title. Triple D, I don't know if you are with us since the start, but if you were not, when this goes up, and this video will upload 10-15 minutes after the stream finishes, it will go up on the channel as a video. But please go back and listen to the first 2 or 3 minutes of this, because I've compared it to the Gale Groves, Fury, Chisora, Eubank, Saunders. I think they've made the fight at the right time. I'd rather see this fight get made than not happen. Zach says, who do you think will have the bigger punch resistance? Do you know what? I literally don't know, Zach. I've got no clue on that. I don't have any instinct. Anonymous says Ohara's been sparring middleweights out under TMT gyms. You Got Soul says both fighters have a good KO record. Does this fight go the distance? They've got a good KO record, but neither of them have fought opposition as strong as each other. So often when that happens, you kind of see the KO streak happen, stop when they go up in level of opposition. I think that on balance of probabilities, it probably does. Doesn't go the distance because they're both big punchers and they've both got unproven chins. But you know, no result in this fight would surprise me. I just find it so hard to call. Mikey reckons Taylor's got a better trainer too. Carlton says Ohara Davies' seriously long arms will be a big problem for Taylor. Rough Musk, fantastic year of boxing, probably the best for several years, I would say. Another great fight made, certainly domestically. Anonymous says Ohara's like a spider, long and gangly. Mikey says Channel 5 need to do some sort of gloves are off. It'd be interesting, actually, Mikey, to see how Channel 5 market this, especially given that it's on the same night as Saunders versus Kurtzides. You know, potentially they can look to make a statement here and show their commitment to boxing. So this is a big fight, and if marketed correctly, it will become a massive fight. John says, hopefully this fight gets the promo it deserves. I'm sure Ohara will be a loudmouth as usual. Well, you're not wrong there, John. Scunny Tom says, can imagine Channel 5 wouldn't have the budget to hold the gloves are off slight type press conference. Will presumably be held in Little Steph. Well, I hope not, but I'll await with interest, definitely. But there you go, guys. This wasn't supposed to be a long live stream. I just wanted to get some perspective on what you guys were thinking of this matchup and some initial reaction. Great fight. Absolutely delighted it's been made. I'm really looking forward to this one. Gonna call it a night there. We'll be back on the channel tomorrow with some more updates, and of course you got the podcast every Wednesday, including this Wednesday at 8:30. If you're new to the channel and you haven't done so before, please press subscribe so you can check out all the other stuff. If you've enjoyed this live stream, please hit the thumbs up, and you can do that whether you're watching live now or after this is uploaded as a video to the channel. Many thanks for watching, guys, as always. Hope everyone has a good evening. I'm out.